Shalom and welcome back to God's Story, Our Story, Catholics for Israel's online Bible course. I am still Dr. Andre Villeneuve. Today we continue our study of the two books of Kings. Last time we looked at 1 Kings, which focused on the reign of Solomon. Solomon was the greatest king of Israel. He also brought Israel to the peak of the nation's glory, arguably not just in the Old Testament and in the Bible as a whole, but also in all of Israel's history, even to this day. Solomon built the magnificent temple in Jerusalem, which became a house of prayer for all nations. He also left a great legacy of wisdom, so that all surrounding nations would come to Jerusalem to worship together with Israel in the Jerusalem temple, and to learn from Solomon the great wisdom that God had given to Israel. This was truly a glorious time for the nation. Unfortunately, as we saw, Solomon failed to keep the covenant by multiplying silver and gold, by multiplying horses and chariots, and especially by multiplying wives. He violated the law of the king that the Lord had given to Israel in the book of Deuteronomy. Especially his many wives led him away from the Lord, so that by the end of his life, he turned to foreign gods. Because of these sins and this unfaithfulness, the Lord told Solomon that he would tear the kingdom away from him after his death. And so after the death of Solomon, the kingdom was indeed divided into the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. Despite Solomon's failures, we know that the Lord was faithful to his promises to David, and so he would still keep a descendant of David upon the throne in Jerusalem up to the exile and even beyond. But as we saw last time in the first book of Kings, the division of the kingdom would mark the beginning of a long decline. All kings in the northern kingdom of Israel were evil, and most in the southern kingdom of Judah were evil as well. Only a few good kings reigning from Jerusalem would manage to postpone the divine judgment coming upon the city, but they would not be able to completely avert it. Today we move on to the second book of Kings, and our theme is the divided kingdom and prophets. We will continue surveying the history of both kingdoms of Israel and Judah through this long and tragic decline, but we will also continue to see God's faithfulness even in times of infidelity on the part of the people. Outline of 2 Kings. The book begins with the divided kingdom. We pick it up right from where we stopped at the end of 1 Kings. At first, there is peace between Israel and Judah up to chapter 9, but then there is enmity and even war between the two kingdoms of Israel and Judah. Once we reach chapter 17, Assyria will deport the northern kingdom of Israel, and from chapter 18 on, only the kingdom of Judah remains alone. And so we will survey that history from Hezekiah's reign to the reign of Zedekiah, the fall of the kingdom of Judah, and the release of King Jehoiachin at the end of 2 Kings. We've already seen this complex timeline of the kings and prophets of Israel and Judah. Here is King Solomon, and as we made it through 1 Kings, we made it up to around here. King Ahaziah in the northern kingdom of Israel, and King Jehoshaphat in the southern kingdom of Judah. So this yellow line here are the kings of Israel up to their deportation in 722 BC, and the green line on the bottom is the kingdom of Judah up to their own exile in 586 BC from the Babylonians. As we said last time, in the middle we have all the prophets. So here are the prophets we read about in the books of Kings. And over here we have the classic prophets. In red are those who prophesy to the nations, in yellow those who prophesy to the northern kingdom, and in green those who prophesy to the southern kingdom of Judah. So we begin the second book of Kings. In Judah, Jehoshaphat is still king, one of the great kings of Judah who reigned for 25 years. He was a good king but did not destroy the high places, and he did make peace with the kings of Israel. In the north, the king is Ahaziah. He falls to his lattice, injures himself, but instead of turning to the Lord and seeking healing from him, he turns to Baal-zebub and inquires for healing from the Canaanite god. This is going to lead Elijah, who is still around, to prophesy his death, and indeed, Ahaziah is going to die after only a brief 2-year reign. At this time, it's the end of Elijah's prophetic ministry, and it is time for him to be taken up to heaven. Note the route of Elijah's journey to heaven. He first goes back to Gilgal, then to Bethel, then to Jericho, and then is going to divide the waters of the Jordan and cross the Jordan. Obviously, we recognize something here. What is Elijah doing? He is doing a type of reversal of the conquest. You may recall from the book of Joshua, Gilgal was the first encampment of the Israelites after they took over the land. Bethel was also one of the first cities to be conquered. Jericho was the very first city that Joshua and the Israelites conquered. And of course, the Israelites also crossed the Jordan to enter the land by dividing the waters. So Elijah is reversing the conquest, signifying a type of departure of the prophetic word of life from the land of Israel. Fortunately, we know that Elijah prepared a successor, his disciple Elisha, and Elisha will return to the land and bring the word of prophecy back into the land. After Elijah is taken up to heaven in a chariot of fire, his disciple Elisha takes over the prophetic ministry. Immediately he gets to work. He's already asked for a double portion of the Spirit, and so Elisha's ministry will be even greater than Elijah's. Right from the beginning, he purifies water that has been contaminated, and in a very strange incident, a group of boys mock and ridicule Elisha, which leads to 2 bears attacking them and killing 42 of those boys. So the lesson is, do not mock the prophetic ministry that the Lord sends to his people. The next king of Israel is Jehoram, otherwise known as Yoram. You see that number 4? This means that this is still the 4th dynasty in Israel. It's still the dynasty of Omri and Ahab that we saw last time. Jehoram is another evil king in Israel. He's going to reign 12 years. At this time, Mesha, the king of Moab, rebels against Israel. And this leads Jehoram to make an alliance with Jehoshaphat. And so we have a time of peace and of alliance between the kings of Israel and Judah. Together with the king of Edom, they go to war against Moab. At this time, there is a drought, and Elisha prophesies that the drought will come to an end and that the Lord will grant victory to this coalition of Israel and Judah against Moab. Indeed, God delivers. He provides water and gives a victory to Israel and Judah against Moab. So once again, we see God who is truly faithful and still delivers his people even in the midst of sin and apostasy. Speaking of the king of Moab, we've found a really interesting discovery that confirms this biblical account, and this is known as the Mesha Stela, or the Moabite stone. What is that? This is a black basalt stone with an inscription by the Moabite king Mesha, dating from around 850 BC, and this was discovered in 1868. It is a memorial of Mesha's victories in his revolt against Israel after the death of his overlord Ahab. So it sounds quite familiar. It's almost exactly what we just saw in the biblical account. So what does this stone say? We don't need to read the whole thing, but significantly it says, I am Mesha, the son of Chemosh, the king of Moab. My father was king over Moab for 30 years, and I became king after my father. So Chemosh is the Moabite god. And so he says that Chemosh has delivered me from all kings, and because he has made me look down on all my enemies. Omri was king of Israel, and he oppressed Moab for many days, for Chemosh was angry with his land. And his son, presumably Ahab, reigned in his place. And he also said, I will oppress Moab. But I looked down on him and on his house, and Israel has been defeated. And Chemosh then said to me, Go take Nebo from Israel. And so I went in the night and fought against it from the daybreak until midday, and so on. He even says, I took the vessels of Yahweh, and so the name of the Lord of Israel is mentioned on this stone. And at the end, he even mentions the house of David. So this stone for the 9th century BC really confirms a lot of the accounts that we just saw in the books of Kings. The text then focuses on Elisha's ministry and how the Lord brings life and deliverance and hope to the humble and the faithful in Israel, even in this time of failure and infidelity on the part of the people. Elisha meets a widow who was formerly married to a prophet, and she is very poor, so he multiplies oil for her, which is going to provide sustenance. Then he meets a Shunammite woman who welcomes Elisha, and she is without child, so Elisha prophesies that she will bear a son. Indeed, a son is born the following spring, but unfortunately, as the son grows up, he dies being still young. The woman, of course, very distressed, goes and finds Elisha at Mount Carmel, and Elisha returns and brings her son back to life. So once again, we see God who is in the business of not only revealing truth, but also giving life to his people Israel, even in the midst of apostasy. It's also a time of famine because of the wickedness of the kings of Israel, and so Elisha provides food. In the midst of this famine, he does a miracle where he purifies a stew that has gone bad for the sons of the prophets in the land. He also has a bread miracle where he feeds 100 men with 20 loaves. In many ways, the miracles of Elisha anticipate the even greater miracles that Jesus will perform, in both cases revealing God's mercy to his people in times of trouble. Possibly Elisha's most famous miracle is the healing of Naaman the Syrian. Naaman is a Syrian commander who has leprosy, and he goes to Israel to find Elisha. Elisha tells him, "Go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan." At first, Naaman is somewhat offended. He's thinking, can't you just say a word and heal me? Why do I have to go through these strange motions of washing myself 7 times in the Jordan? In the end, he does it, and he is indeed healed. And so this shows that God has mercy even upon foreigners who turn to him. Elisha manages to make a lost axe head float, another interesting miracle. And Elisha also performs national miracles. The Syrian army arrives and threatens the Israelite army, but they are surrounded by an angelic host so that they are struck blind. Elisha leads them away to Samaria, where they are captured, but then by the grace of God also released. So the Lord even provides military victories to his people. Later, the Syrian army returns and besieges Samaria. The situation is extremely serious. There is famine in the city, so that even women are forced to eat their children. So this not only points to the gravity of the famine, but also to the moral depravity among the people at this time as they resort to cannibalism. In this desperate situation, the king even seeks to kill Elisha, but Elisha announces that the famine will end the following day, something that seems completely unthinkable. That same evening, 4 lepers are so desperate of finding food that they leave Samaria, go to the Syrian camp, and lo and behold, it is abandoned. As it turns out, the Lord made the Syrians hear this sound of a great cavalry and a great army coming to them, so that they panicked and lifted the siege and went back home. So the 4 lepers return to Samaria, alert the king, and indeed by the next day it's the end of the siege and of the famine. So truly God protects and delivers his people even in those times. The same Shunammite that we met earlier, after leaving the land because of the famine, returns, and her land is restored to her by the king. Elisha then receives the visit of a Syrian official called Hazael. Why? Because the king of Syria, Ben-Hadad, is sick, and so the king of Syria has also heard of this great prophet. He sends his official to get a word from the prophet. Elisha delivers an ambiguous and apparently contradictory oracle to Hazael. He says that Ben-Hadad will indeed recover, but he will die. So which one is it? Is he going to recover or is he going to die? As it turns out, Hazael returns to Syria. Ben-Hadad does recover from his illness, but then Hazael goes on to murder Ben-Hadad, and Hazael becomes the next king of Syria. Here is the map of the ministry of Elijah and Elisha. As you can see, they ministered entirely to the north, and so miracles throughout the northern kingdom of Israel, manifesting God's grace and mercy in this time of decline. We continue to follow our line of kings. This is still the 4th dynasty of the kingdom of Israel, and in the kingdom of Judah, it is still the line of David. The next king, unfortunately, is a bad one. He is also named Jehoram, confusingly. Both kings of Israel and Judah have the same name. And so after the good reigns of Asa and Jehoshaphat in the southern kingdom of Judah, we go back to bad kings also in Judah. At the time of Jehoram, Edom revolts against Judah, and after a reign of 8 years, the next king is Ahaziah, and he is going to reign for only 1 year. Ahaziah makes an alliance with Joram, who is son of Ahab and king of Israel. So now we have this alliance and partnership still between the king of Israel and the king of Judah against Hazael, the king of Syria. And Ahaziah's mother, significantly, is Athaliah, and we will see her again in just a moment. Now the two kings have gone to battle against Syria, but Jehoram is injured, and so Ahaziah goes to Jezreel to visit Joram, and as the two kings are visiting together, we are introduced to this new figure, a guy called Yehu, who will truly bring chaos in both kingdoms. So this Yehu is anointed by Elisha to become the next king of Israel. He has a great calling to overthrow the wicked house of Omri, and he is called to follow the Lord's covenant so that the Lord will be able to bless him. And so this Yehu's legacy is quite a bloody one. As Jehoram and Ahaziah are visiting together in Jezreel, Yehu comes and manages to kill both kings. So Yehu kills Joram, he kills Ahaziah. He also pursues Jezebel and has her killed. She is thrown out of the window from the walls of the city, and her blood splatters on the wall, a gruesome end to this wicked queen of Israel. Yehu goes on to kill the entire house of Ahab, all of Ahab's family. He also kills the prophets of Baal, and Yehu actually receives words of praise for completely annihilating the wicked dynasty of Omri and Ahab. At this time, however, Hazael of Syria conquers parts of Israel, and that's the end of Yehu, who begins this new long-lasting dynasty in Israel. Now recall that the king of Judah was also killed by Yehu, and so who seizes power next? This is going to be Athaliah, the daughter of Ahab and the mother of Ahaziah, the former king. And she is also bloodthirsty. She kills the entire royal family in order to secure her reign, except for one small child called Joash, who is a newborn, and the sister of the deceased king Ahaziah takes him and hides him for 6 years. And so we have this woman, this queen in Judah, who temporarily breaks the Davidic line as she usurps the power that is not hers. After 6 years, the priest Jehoiada enthrones Joash so that Joash, just at the age of 7, becomes the legitimate king of Judah. The people gather around Joash and they have Athaliah killed, and that's the end of her illicit reign. There follows a religious reform and a turning away from the idols in the land of Judah. So Joash is the next king of Judah. He is by and large a good king who reigns for a long time, for 40 years. He repairs the temple, but he still has to pay tribute to Hazael of Syria. Unfortunately, he is killed by his servants, and the second book of Chronicles explains that this was due to Joash's apostasy. At the end of his life, he also was not faithful to the Lord. Going back to the northern kingdom of Israel, the son of Yehu, Jehoahaz, now reigns for 17 years. Again, he is in red because all kings of Israel are wicked. He is delivered to Hazael and Ben-Hadad III of Syria. The next one to reign is another Joash of Israel. He's going to reign for 16 years, yet another wicked king. This is the time of the death of Elisha. So the lamp of prophecy is snuffed out of the northern kingdom of Israel after the passing of Elijah and Elisha. Hazael of Syria oppresses Israel, and Jehoash manages to recapture some cities from Syria. He does go to war against Amaziah, and so this is the end of the era of peace between Israel and Judah. So the next king of Judah, Amaziah, is going to be at war against Joash, and Joash goes and even plunders the temple. So we've gone back to the situation of dire enmity between Israel and Judah. And then Joash dies, and that's the end of his reign. In the southern kingdom of Judah, Amaziah reigns for 29 years, so another good king. He goes to war against Edom, but he is defeated by Joash of Israel, who comes and raids the temple. unfortunately for Amaziah, he's killed in a conspiracy. So we can see how much of a complex history it is to follow the ups and downs of these kings of Israel and Judah. Here's the map of the conflicts between Israel and Damascus. So as we can see, Damascus or Syria or Aram are still the major enemies and the major foes of Israel at this point. So we see many of these conflicts and clashes occurring here in the northern kingdom of Israel. There are the kings of Aram or Syria. Confusingly, they all have the same name. So we have 3 Ben-Hadads, 1 Hazael, and we will talk about Rezin in a few minutes. Ironically, we have a second quote-unquote golden age in both Israel and Judah. The next king is Jeroboam II. Recall that Jeroboam was the first king of the northern kingdom of Israel. And now from this dynasty of Yehu, which is a long-lasting dynasty, Jeroboam II will reign for 41 years. So a long reign, he will bring some degree of economic and political stability to Israel, but certainly not a spiritual, religious, or moral golden age. So Jeroboam II restores and expands the territory of Israel, and this is the time of the prophets Jonah, Amos, and Hosea. We know that Jonah famously prophesied to Nineveh, to Assyria, but certainly he also would have prophesied to Jeroboam II, and we know that Amos and Hosea will rail against the northern kingdom of Israel for their complacency and for their prosperity in the midst of this moral decadence. In the southern kingdom of Judah, the next king is Azariah, otherwise known as Uzziah. So also a great time of stability in the south. As you can see, Amaziah, good king for 29 years, and Azariah, another good king for 52 years. So Azariah is a good king. He wins military victories for Judah, but at the end of his life, he becomes proud and offers incense in the temple. This, of course, is prohibited to the king. Only priests can offer incense in the temple. And this is going to cause him to be a leper until his death. So Azariah, a good king on the whole, but he also falls from grace at the end of his life. Another map of Israel and Judah at the time of Jeroboam II and Uzziah. As we said, a time of stability for both kingdoms, but still a time of decline in the north in the kingdom of Israel. At this time in the east, a new empire is rising, and this is going to be the Assyrian Empire, which begins here centered in Nineveh and soon will control the entire ancient Near East, becoming a serious threat to both Israel and Judah. Here are the main Assyrian emperors who will become this threat to Israel and Judah: Tiglath-Pileser III, Shalmaneser V, Sargon II, and Sennacherib. So Assyria is now going to become the main foe of both kingdoms. The northern kingdom of Israel is now in a decline that cannot stop. We are still in this 5th dynasty, and the last king of Yehu's line is a man called Zechariah, not to be confused with the prophet Zechariah. He reigns for only 6 months and is killed by a certain Shallum. He is the last king of Yehu's dynasty. Shallum reigns for only 1 month before he is killed by a guy called Menachem. Menachem does manage to reign for 10 years, but the decline is now advancing. Tiglath-Pileser, otherwise known as Pul in the Bible, becomes a serious threat to the northern kingdom, and so Menachem has to pay tribute to the Assyrian Empire. His son Pekahiah is going to reign only 2 years before he is assassinated by his officer Pekah. And so we are now at the 7th dynasty in the northern kingdom of Israel. So a short reign of 2 years for Pekahiah. He is followed by Pekah, who does reign for 20 years, and at this time Tiglath-Pileser conquers parts of the Galilee, and so the northern kingdom is beginning to fall apart. He is killed by a man called Hoshea, same name but different person as the prophet Hosea. In the south, we have a streak of good kings. So following Azariah, Yotam is going to reign for 16 years, but will have to fight a war against Pekah of Israel and Rezin, the king of Syria. Following Yotam, we return to evil kings in Judah, and this one is infamous. Ahaz, the son of Yotam. Ahaz offers child sacrifices and engages in pagan worship. He is attacked by Pekah of Israel and Rezin, the king of Syria. And why is he most infamous? Because this was the time of the great prophet Isaiah. And in the midst of this war against Israel and Syria, he is offered a sign from the Lord, and he refuses. He does not want to accept this sign from the Lord. As it turns out, this is going to be the famous sign of the Emmanuel, of the young woman or virgin who will bear a child, and his name will be God with us, Emmanuel. So Ahaz is remembered infamously for refusing the sign of the Emmanuel. This is the time of the Syro-Ephraimite War. We are in 735 BC. As we said, Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the king of Israel, attacked Judah and besieged Jerusalem. Ahaz, the king of Judah, instead of turning to the Lord, calls upon Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria, for help, and becomes the vassal of Assyria. As if that's not bad enough, Ahaz offers silver and gold from the temple to the king of Assyria, so he desecrates even the temple of Jerusalem for the sake of appeasing the king of Assyria. Assyria comes against Damascus, carrying people captive and killing Rezin, the king of Syria. Ahaz is not done with his wickedness. He even replaces the temple altar in Jerusalem with an Assyrian altar. So he goes full on into this apostasy after making this alliance with Assyria. So Ahaz dies in shame, one of the worst kings of Judah. Here's the map of Tiglath-Pileser III's campaigns and the areas that were transformed into Assyrian provinces. So at this point, the Assyrians come, they raid the north of the kingdom of Israel, and even make their way through Philistia and down to Egypt. And so both Israel and Judah will be under this severe military pressure from the Assyrians. Hoshea is the last king of Israel. He is a vassal of Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, but decides to seek help from Egypt. So we're going to hear the prophets constantly warning the kings of Israel against these foreign alliances. Egypt fails to help Israel, and so Assyria comes and conquers Samaria, deporting most of the population. So that's the end of the northern kingdom of Israel. Chapter 17 of 2 Kings then launches into an extended theological commentary saying, how could this have happened? Did the Lord forsake his people? And of course the answer is no. This defeat and conquest and deportation of the northern kingdom is the result of their sustained, prolonged apostasy because they forsook the Lord and pursued other gods. Assyria then repopulates Samaria with foreigners who will become the Samaritans. This is the birth of the Samaritans, who will have a syncretistic type of worship, kind of worshiping the Lord, but also worshiping Assyrian gods. So this is a momentous event in the history of the chosen people, the fall of the northern kingdom of Israel in 722 BC. Fortunately for Judah, they will have a reprieve because the son of Ahaz is one of Judah's best kings. This is Hezekiah, and he's going to reign for 29 years. So here we see on the map the deportation of the Israelites and the fall of Samaria. So the Assyrians come here from the north. They take Samaria, destroy the city, and take the Israelites into exile into the kingdom of Assyria. Now only Judah remains. Hezekiah is king for 29 years, and he launches a vigorous religious reform, destroying all the pagan altars and leading Israel back to God. At this point, Shalmaneser takes Samaria. This is the downfall of the northern kingdom that we just saw. But Sennacherib, the next king of Assyria, is not content with this victory. He also besieges Jerusalem. We are now in 701 BC. Famously, Hezekiah reacts to the Assyrian siege very differently from his father Ahaz. Hezekiah is actually pious. It is still the time of Isaiah the prophet. Isaiah tells them to seek the Lord and to pray and do penance, and indeed God is going to deliver Jerusalem from the siege of the Assyrians, who at this time have raided and devastated the entire hill country of Judea. We have here another confirmation of the biblical record from archaeological finds, and this is known as Sennacherib's prism. So this is this prism that you see here on the screen, and it says something very interesting. Now remember, these monuments in the ancient Near East never admitted defeat. They were always the writings of kings who boasted about their victories. So look at how Sennacherib boasts about his victories in Judah. The prism says this: Because Hezekiah, king of Judah, would not submit to my yoke, I came up against him, and by force of arms and by the might of my power, I took 46 of his strong fenced cities, and of the smaller towns which were scattered about. I took and plundered a countless number, and Hezekiah himself I shut up in Jerusalem his capital city, like a bird in a cage, building towers round the city to hem him in, and raising banks of earth against the gates, so as to prevent escape. So Sennacherib here is boasting about all his victories in Judah, but what does he not say? He does not say that he ever took and conquered and destroyed Jerusalem. It only says that he shut Hezekiah up in Jerusalem like a bird in a cage. So he's tacitly admitting defeat, that he did not manage to conquer and destroy Jerusalem. Hezekiah becomes ill. He also prays to the Lord, and the Lord grants him recovery and an extra 15 years of his life. So we really see a stark contrast between the wicked Ahaz, who refuses to trust in the Lord, and the very good king Hezekiah, who launches this religious reform, turns to God for deliverance against the Assyrians, and even prays to God when he is sick. So once again, the Lord does deliver and does give blessings to his people when they turn to him. The only stain in Hezekiah's legacy is that he receives envoys from Merodach-Baladan, who is the king of Babylon, way further in the east. At this point, Babylon are not enemies, and so Hezekiah shows this envoy all the treasures of Judah, not knowing that the Babylonians would come and conquer Jerusalem and carry all those riches back to Babylonia just a few generations later. And so he receives a word of rebuke from Isaiah, but thanks to his righteousness, this will not occur in Hezekiah's life. Here is the map of Sennacherib's campaign against Judah. As we can see, he raided all these cities in the south of Judah, and only Jerusalem he was not able to take. Here's the map of the Assyrian supremacy in the 7th century. As we said, Assyria controlled the entire ancient Near East, even Egypt down the Nile Delta. And so there was no stopping the Assyrians for several generations. Unfortunately for Judah, after the excellent reign of King Hezekiah, the next king was the worst in Judah. And so another stain on Hezekiah's legacy is that he was apparently not very good in passing on the faith to his children, because his own son Manasseh was the single worst king of Judah, and unfortunately he also reigned for 55 years. So Manasseh restores the idolatrous worship in Judah. He even sacrifices children, he consults mediums and wizards, and this is going to lead to God's judgment being announced upon Judah. The reign of King Manasseh is the point of no return from Judah. Now judgment will become inevitable. According to an apocryphal book called The Ascension of Isaiah, it was during this reign of the wicked King Manasseh that Isaiah was martyred by being sawed in two, by being cut in two. Manasseh is even taken captive to Babylon for a time, and the second book of Chronicles informs us that he actually repented in Babylonia. So this is not mentioned in 2 Kings. 2 Kings has only a damning report on Manasseh by saying, Manasseh rebuilt the high places that Hezekiah his father had destroyed, and he erected altars for Baal and made an Asherah, as Ahab king of Israel had done, and worshipped all the host of heaven and served them. And he burned his son as an offering, and used fortune-telling and omens, and dealt with mediums and with necromancers. So all in all, really the worst king of Judah, this King Manasseh. His son Amon has a short reign of only 2 years. He is just as evil as his father Manasseh, and he is killed by his servants. Next, we have another of the greatest kings of Israel, and this is Josiah, who is going to reign for 31 years. He begins to reign at 8 years old. In his 8th year, he begins to seek the Lord, and in his 12th year, he begins a vigorous religious reform that is mentioned both in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles. Josiah repairs the temple, and at this time, the high priest Hilkiah finds the scroll of the Torah in the temple. It seems like they had just about forgotten what the Torah was, and so the Torah is read to Josiah. He is horrified to see to what extent Judah has failed to keep the commandments of the Lord, engaging in all this pagan idolatry. So he does penance, and continues this great, vigorous religious reform. Unfortunately, the die have been cast, and so we have a prophetess called Huldah who has a prophecy of doom upon Judah, but once again, because of Josiah's faithfulness, this judgment and destruction of Jerusalem will be delayed. Josiah continues his great religious reforms, and this earns him great praise from the Lord. He also celebrates the Passover, which is always a sign of great faithfulness, but divine judgment at this point is inevitable. Josiah tragically is killed by Pharaoh Necho in Megiddo, so the Egyptians are becoming more aggressive, and in the midst of this battle, Josiah, the great king of Israel, is killed. There is the map with the rise now of the new Babylonian Empire, who will take over Assyria, leading to the fall of Nineveh in 612 BC, and they will become the next threat to Judah. We come to the time of Judah's last kings, and we're going to see Judah falling apart just as Israel fell apart a few generations earlier. The son of Josiah is Jehoiachaz. He reigns for only 3 months, but now the Egyptians come and deport him to Egypt. So he is taken to Egypt by Pharaoh Necho. The next king is Jehoiakim, also a son of Josiah, and he is placed as a puppet king over Jerusalem by the Egyptians. He will manage to reign for 11 years, but in 605 BC, we see the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, who besieges Jerusalem. Jehoiakim becomes his vassal for 3 years, but then foolishly rebels. This leads to the first Babylonian invasion and first Babylonian captivity, where a young man called Daniel is taken into exile to Babylon. So this is the golden age of the prophets. In this time of decline and near destruction for Judah, it's a time of one of the greatest prophets of Israel, Jeremiah, who will preach to the last kings of Judah, saying, "Repent and submit to the king of Babylon, and it shall be well to you. Do not resist him. Do not rebel against Babylon." And of course, what are they going to do? They will disregard his advice and will rebel against Babylon, leading to the destruction of the kingdom. The next king is Jehoiachin, and he reigns for only 3 months. In 597 BC, Nebuchadnezzar returns. He besieges and raids Jerusalem, takes Jehoiachin, the people, and the treasures of the temple to Babylon. And in the second raid, another man will be taken to Babylon, and his name is Ezekiel. And so another great prophet of Israel will prophesy to the exiles from Babylon. The last king of Israel is Zedekiah. He will reign for 11 years. And also, foolishly, he disregards the advice of Jeremiah, rebels against Babylon, and this is going to unleash the full wrath of Babylon upon Jerusalem. In 588 BC, the Babylonians besiege Jerusalem. King Zedekiah is captured. His sons are killed before him, and the Babylonians put out his eyes. And so that's the end of Zedekiah, who is going to be dragged to Babylonia in total humiliation. In 586 BC, it's the end. The Babylonians destroy Jerusalem. They destroy the temple. It's the complete collapse of everything that Israel had built since the time of the Exodus and their conquest of the land. Nebuchadnezzar carries the remaining Jews to Babylonia so that only a small remnant remain in Judah. Nebuchadnezzar then sets a governor over Judah. His name is Gedaliah, and he is going to try to pick up the pieces and reestablish some semblance of stability, but unfortunately he is assassinated by some Jewish zealots, still plunging what is left of Judah into chaos. At the very end of 2 Kings, we see a glimmer of hope. King Jehoiachin, who had been taken to Babylonia in 597 BC, is released from prison by the Babylonian king Evil-Merodach, and he is treated kindly. And so the second book of Kings ends there with this glimpse of hope with one of the last kings of Judah who is freed from prison. But as we come to the end of this book, Israel is gone and Judah is in exile in Babylon. So we have to emphasize how much of a tragedy this is, that this is the collapse of everything that Israel had received from the Lord since the time of the Exodus. So the inevitable question is, has God forsaken his people? Is this the end? The whole kingdom of Israel and Judah is gone. And we know that the answer to that is, of course, know that God will remain faithful to his people, and he will still work with this remnant in exile, and eventually will return them back from exile. So here's the map of Nebuchadnezzar's campaign, leading to the destruction of the temple, destruction of Jerusalem, and exile of Judah to Babylonia. So here is the route of the exile. All the Jews will be taken now to Babylonia, where they will remain for some 70 years. Here's again our timeline. We can see the kingdom of Israel on the left that came to an end in 722 BC, and how the kingdom of Judah lasted for some 150 years later until they were deported by the Babylonians. So the end of both kingdoms of Israel and Judah. Before we part today, we want to end on a note of hope. We know that the prophets had many oracles for the people of Israel. We will look at some of their message in the next video. But for now, let's look at this note of hope that the prophets anticipated and this future restoration of the kingdom of Israel and Judah. We know that God promised to David that a son of David would always remain on the throne of Israel. Well, what happened to that? There's no more throne of Israel now that the kingdom has fallen and the kings have been taken into exile. Well, we know that much later, God would raise up a new son of David. Here again is the covenant that God made with David from 2 Samuel chapter 7. God said, "I will make you a great name. I will set up your seed after you, who will come from your body, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. And your house and your kingdom shall be established forever before you. Your throne shall be established forever." Much later, we're going to see the angel Gabriel appear to a young Jewish woman from the tribe of Judah and from the line of David, and he will recall the Davidic covenant to this young Jewish woman by saying, "And behold, you will conceive in your womb and bring forth a son, and shall call his name Yeshua," or Jesus. "He will be great and will be called the Son of the Highest. And the Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end." Recall that in 2 Samuel, one of the first things that David did was bringing the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. And I noted the language that was used there when we studied 2 Samuel. We know that David arose and went to the hill country of Judah, and much later, Mary arose and went to the hill country of Judah. David said, "How can the ark of the Lord come to me?" Later, Elizabeth would say to Mary, "Why is this granted me that the mother of my Lord should come to me?" David danced for joy in the presence of the ark, and much later, John the Baptist would leap or dance in Elizabeth's womb as Mary came to visit her. The ark remained in the hill country of Judah for 3 months, and much later, Mary remained with Elizabeth for 3 months. So what does this indicate? That the Gospel of Luke presents Mary as the Ark of the New Covenant, that in her womb was the divine presence of God, just as the divine presence of God rested in the Ark of the Covenant. What are some of the characteristics of the Davidic kingdom that we will find much later in the new Son of David? The Davidic king was called Son of God in Psalm 2, for example. The Davidic king is the Anointed One, or Messiah, Mashiach in Hebrew. The Davidic kingdom was centered on Jerusalem, that is Mount Zion. The sign of the Davidic covenant was the temple, the house of the Lord, which was a microcosm, a world in miniature. The Davidic king ruled over all 12 tribes of Israel. The Davidic king ruled over an international empire, including the Gentiles, and the Davidic kingdom was to be everlasting. What are we going to see with the rise of Jesus, the Son of David? He will be indeed Son of David and Son of God. Jesus is also the Lord's anointed, the Messiah. Jesus' life, ministry, and death is going to be centered on Jerusalem. The temple will be central to Jesus' life and teachings. Jesus appoints 12 apostles to restore the unity of the 12 tribes of Israel. Jesus' kingship extends to all nations, and Jesus will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and there will be no end to his kingdom. So we will see all of this fulfilled when we come to the Gospels and the New Testament. Also, the Davidic kingdom had secondary characteristics, such as the queen mother known as the Gevira in Israel. We saw in 1 Kings chapter 2 how Solomon rose up from his throne and bowed down to his mother Bathsheba when Bathsheba had a request to present to him. The Davidic king also had a type of prime minister or chief steward who was given the keys to the house of David. We find this man to be Eliakim in the reign of Hezekiah. You can read about that in Isaiah chapter 22. So this chief steward who administrated the Davidic kingdom. Also in the Davidic kingdom, the Todah offering of bread and wine celebrated God's deliverance. So the thanksgiving offering, which was central to Israel's liturgy at the time. We are also going to find secondary characteristics under the new son of David. Jesus' mother will reign alongside him as Queen Mother. We can see her in the book of Revelation chapter 12. Jesus will give the keys of the kingdom also to a chief administrator, namely Peter, and the Eucharist, which means thanksgiving, or Todah in Hebrew, will be this new sacrifice of thanksgiving that celebrates God's deliverance. This concludes our study of the second book of Kings, a time of decline and tragedy, but also of hope, thanks to the message of the prophets. In our next video, we will look a little more closely at this message of both judgment and hope as proclaimed by the prophets. I will see you next time. Shalom and God bless.